Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it is that time of year. It only happens once a year where MCGRATH Labs launches a Mothership palette. MOTHER Mothership palette. So, of course, you guys know I got my hands on it. I already did a shopper drop on this. This is the Mothership SUNLIT Seduction. She's in my hands. I just got back from vacation, so I'm excited to put this on my eyeballs. I'm also going to do a couple tutorials, a couple swatch comparisons, all of that good stuff. So let's not waste any time. Let's get into it. So you can purchase this on the MCGRATH website as well as Sephora now for my Sephora shoppers. I haven't used this palette yet, so I'll let you know if my opinion's changed, or I don't think it will. I would hold off if you're interested in this palette because MCGRATH Labs has a lot of sales, and it's going to be a few months before this palette goes on sales, but if you can be patient, most of the time you can get a pretty good discount on this. Make sure you have my notification bell on because I do let you know in my community tab whenever there are sales for you to pick up things that you've wanted, so eventually this will be on sale. But let's see, maybe it's amazing? We'll see. Okay, so this palette is $128, which, sticker shock, right? I remember my mom purchased a Mothership palette when they first launched, those first three. I could not believe she spent that much on an eyeshadow palette, and here I am, buying every single one. They're that good. Here's the box that it comes in, and when I first saw the box, I was really excited because it has a lot of purple in it. It's pink as well, and you guys know, I didn't really want another pink palette. I wanted something different. This packaging is the classic McGrath packaging. It's this heavy black lacquer palette, extremely luxury. I'm gonna talk some trash in some parts of this video, but cannot fault this luxurious packaging. It is not travel friendly, but it is amazing. Remember, if you haven't seen this yet, I did not want a pink palette. Every palette I feel like she's been launching has been super pink. And she gave us, potentially, one of the pinkest palettes she's ever launched. It's a little insulting at this point, because I think the true MCGRATH fans have been like, no more pink, no more pink. And
oh my god, bro.
One of the pinkest palettes she's ever launched. Now, I will say, looking at this beauty, she is a beauty. She's gorgeous, stunning, even more beautiful in person than in the photos. I'm looking at the photos online. It almost looks more warm online. It is a little bit more true pink, which is oddly fitting for the time of year with the Barbie launch and all of that. So I am excited about pinks right now. Everybody's wearing pinks, so it makes sense in that way, but I wish it would have been something different. Like, how cool would it have been if they collaborated with Barbie specifically, and instead of this girl, it was like Barbie, and then an actual Barbie palette, but also with another Mothership launch that wasn't a pink palette. Yeah, I mean, it's a gorgeous palette. You know how I feel. You're feeling what I'm feeling, but it's very pretty in person. It truly is. So let's get to swatching. I'm telling you right now, without even having compared to the other palettes, these first 6 shades, I have so many palettes from MCGRATH that have these shades. But let's go ahead and swatch. So we're going to start off with the first 6 shades: Skin Tense Radiance, Nude Rose, and Hypnotic Bronze. They don't have a super smooth feeling to them, but they do look very nice. I mean, nice. These are good swatches, but as basic as it gets for MCGRATH. Extreme Vermilion Dust, Copper Dawn, and Sienna Mystique. Here's how they look on this finger. So we have 2 mattes and 1 metallic / shimmer shade. I just want to be like a tale as old as time, right here. Seen that, done that before, but let's take a look at the actual special shades, which is what makes and warrants the price point and this style of a 10-pan Mothership palette to MCGRATH. These expensive Mothership palettes, what makes them special are these 4 formulas in here, which you can really only get in these big palettes. They call these Blitz Astral shades, and they truly are a luxury, unique formula. So we're going to go into Astral Pink Fetish, Blitz Crimson Ecstasy, Astral Amethyst Allure, and then Astral Gilded Aura. These names. but look at that. I mean, it almost looks like a very fine pressed glitter, but it's not actually pressed glitter. They feel beautiful. Now, these are a little different than some of her other special shades because I don't know if you can tell. Looking at the texture, it's not the Blitz Astro shades that have a smooth feeling to them. They aren't glittery or chunky in that way, but it doesn't have that really smooth finish, which I'll show you in the other motherships what I mean, if you aren't quite catching on. But it's a bit different than some of the others. She does have like different versions, I feel like, of these Blitz Astros. But you can even see in the swatch how these have almost a little bit more of like a loose glitter to them, which I really like. I feel like that gives more of a textured and reflective look on the eyelid. I mean, I can't lie. This is gorgeous, especially with the last 4 shades. They're stunning. There's no taking that away from this palette. This is gorgeous. So let's just get this on the eyelid. I'm going to attempt 2 different looks because I do have some concerns over if we can get a variety of looks with this palette. They all are kind of within one color family, so I want to see how much variety we can get here. So I have my Kaleidos eye primer. Pat McGrath did launch an eye primer, and I didn't pick it up because just the palette launched early. It will eventually end up in my hands, but we're waiting, probably for a sale. Just to start off, we're gonna go in with this shade, which I think has potential to be a gorgeous blush. Now this shade, it's a beautiful mid-toned pink, and one thing I must give Pat credit for in her palettes, I find all of her palettes to be very deep skin tone friendly. The mattes that she chooses work great over the largest range of skin tones because the formula is so good. You can build up depth with just one shade. Sorry, very rude to have my phone on, but that is something that marks a high quality eyeshadow. You can use one matte and get multiple depths with that. And then, you know, the names of the colors have already slipped my mind, so we're pointing. Let's see how this shade is right next to the outer corner of my eye. Not even next, literally on the outer corner of my eye. That shade has a little bit more warmth to it, which I think is nice. I think there are similar levels of depths, just slightly different undertones. The mattes in here honestly are quite disappointing to me because I feel like we get the same mattes with every single Pat McGrath palette, and I just want more because a matte can transform a palette. And then I'm gonna use this shade, and this shade honestly is the most disappointing because this kind of shade is in almost every single one of her palettes. And first of all, the packaging is purple. There is no purple in this palette. I need this shade to be a lavender matte, just a true lavender matte, and then I need this to be an extremely dark, deep plum, which Pat does have plenty of, but I feel like with those 2 color changes alone, it would completely transform the versatility of this palette and make it actually match the packaging. At the end of the day, though, the thing is, it's about money. They're making money selling pink, so why stop? Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk is beaten to death for that reason, and we still buy it. I still buy these. I've been a fan for years, since the brand first started, so I have my complaints. But it still is a beautiful palette. So out here in the outer corner, just very lightly. I barely put any pressure on that, and it did add a nice amount of color. So quality we are not short for. It's the same mattes that Pat McGrath has, but also the same colors. Just gonna put a little bit more on. Okay, I just wanted to make sure the mattes at least look different, and they do. Now, one thing about my Pat McGrath palettes is the shimmers. They get neglected. Because why would I use the shimmers when I have the glimmers? But I am going to take the bronze shade. And usually shades like this from Pat are gorgeous. And I'm just going to pop this in the center of the eyelid. I'm not doing a crazy unique look. I'm just trying to test all of the colors. See how they look. Make sure they make sense in the palette. This shade is so pretty for just like a bronze smoky eye with this palette for something simple. So if you're going for like a nice evening look that's not too much, just put this shade all over the eyelid and then a mixture of the matte shades. And that's a stunning look right there. But this is Pat McGrath. we have to use the shimmer shades. I was going for quite pink today, so I'm going to use this shade because this is the one that catches my eye the most. It has a golden shift to it, and you can use a glitter glue with this if you do struggle with fallout. For me, I don't need a glitter glue. I don't mind a little bit of fallout, honestly, on my cheeks. More glitter the better, but look at this. This is why, even though I complain, I continue purchase Pat McGrath. That one shade, look at what it added to the look. It's so luxurious because it sticks to the lid without a glitter primer, and it gives a really scattered, textured look, but it still doesn't have crazy fallout. It's safe for the eyes, multi-dimensional. This is why we love Pat McGrath. I do love that shade. Okay, and then we're going to take this shade right here, pop that on the inner corner. She normally has like a light highlight shade in here, which I do appreciate because it does come in handy. I'm just putting that there. And out of curiosity, this is for sake of the review, I do want to see this shade, which is like a red shade. Just gonna pop this in the center of the eyelid. Now this one seems a little bit crumbly and a little bit thick. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm actually not vibing with the texture of this one. Do you see how it looks flaky? This is going to be unflattering on a mature eyelid. So that's very odd. It doesn't have the smooth feel of that first split shade that I used. It looks chunky and patchy. So that's not great for a palette of this cost. Now I know this looks like eyeshadow barf. It's because it is. But let's try the other eye. Use this pink color again. Just all over the eyelid. Crease, not eyelid. I'm going to use the deepest shade. You can actually get quite deep with this shade, I will admit. When I really pressed a little bit harder, I got a lot of depth with this for something nice and smoky. And then I'm going to carry this into the crease, but I want it to be mostly blended out here. I'm going to use my tone activator to clean up the eyelid. It's been a while. Nobody does cut creases anymore. I'm not really doing a true cut crease. I just want to clean up and brighten this eyelid for a more defined look because I'm really offended by the eyeshadow barf that I have on the other eye. So in the beginning of the eyelid, I'm going to take this golden shade and I'm going to press that on the inner third of the eye. Very reflective and pretty. This shade, which is a little bit more purpley. I'm curious about this one. I'm just gonna pop it on the center. Oh, that's pretty. I really like this somewhat purpley shade. Ooh, I love this look. And then I definitely want more smokiness. So here you're gonna see the high quality Pat McGrath shadows come into play because I can build it up even deeper now. And again, we're using this light shade to highlight. And you know what? I wanted to play around with the textures here, but I think I'm going to take this off. We're gonna do a different look because I need to really test this shade right here. Don't get me wrong, we're not doing anything fancy. I just feel like I have unfinished business with this shade. Starting off with this shade right here, going to use that as the crease color. Has a little bit more warmth. And then I actually want to use this shimmer right here, and I'm going to pop this in the crease as well. The rule of thumb that I learned in makeup school was you can absolutely use a shimmer in the crease, but it's going to be more flattering if you have at least one matte. So that's why I started with the matte color base, and then I'm blending the shimmer over, which looks gorgeous. I'm really happy I did it that way. And it's going to give like a really glowy, bronzy look. Oh my gosh. Do that, and then if you put this all over the lid, oh, you will thank me. That's going to be a gorgeous, effortless, glowy look. But that's not the vibe. That's not what we're doing today. But that would be a look. And then I'm going in with the deepest shade. And we're just going to, pretty much I've decided, put this all over the eyelid. I'm using a blending brush to apply it to the eyelid though, because I want it to be soft. If you put a dark matte like this with a shader brush, sometimes it can look patchy. So I'm using a blending brush to apply it. So it's just going to give a soft, darkened haze over the eyelid. It's pretty base. Moment of truth. I did not like the way that this was picking up on my finger. Do you see that? I do not like the shade. It looks like a foiled eyeshadow gone bad. That is not a good sign for a palette so expensive. No, I think for the first time we have a dud Blitz Astral shade. No, I didn't want it to be this way. I'm really working it in so that we don't get a mess, but I have a mess. The shade is not good. Not for the price point that we pay. Not good. To make it work the best, you're gonna have to use the glitter glue, but you shouldn't have to. This is for the people that say, you know, I talk so much good about MCGRATH to get on her PR list. There's a reason I am not on her PR list, you guys. Consistently anyways. It's because when something is bad, I let you know. And this shade is bad. Ugh, especially for that price point. Okay, let me clean this up. I'm not going to do anything special on the lower lash line. I'm just going to use the same mattes and the same shimmers below, and I'll be back. You know what? I figured I should explain the lower lash line. I didn't do anything crazy, like I said. On this side, all I did, I used the darkest shade along the whole lower lash line. I wet a pointy brush, and I put it in this shade, and I carefully spread this flaky shade all over. That's all I did. And then on this eye, I used the lightest crease shade along the whole lower lash line, and then I built a little bit of depth right out here. That's it. Then this was in the center of the lower lash line, and then this was the inner corner. So that's all I did, nothing special. And then, this is the fun part. I used this shade right here as my blush, and then I used the shade next to it as my highlight, and honestly, I might be more excited about these as cheek colors than as eye colors. Okay, I'm going to finish the rest of my face, but I wanted to share that. Here are the final looks. I'm going to go ahead and give you my opinions at the end because I do have a few swatch comparisons. Like I said, my in-laws are here, so I didn't pull out a ton to swatch, but I pulled out the big players, like Divine Rose 1, because I joked in my swatch and sip that this new palette is really Divine Rose 3, Divine Rose 4, like it is another Divine Rose palette. So here is Divine Rose 1, directly next to Sunlit Seduction right here. And the way, there is definitely a formula that Pat McGrath has for these palettes as to where she places what shadows, but take a look at them side by side on my arm. I did move a couple shades to be a bit of a closer match, but this is Sunlit Seduction, and this is all the close shades I could find from Divine Rose 1. It's like the same color story, but you know how they say same thing but different fonts? This palette is definitely just a different font of Divine Rose 1. Let me pull out Divine Rose 2. So we have Sunlit Seduction and then Divine Rose 2. Now I will say Divine Rose 2 is definitely more different. Sunlit Seduction is closer to Divine Rose 1. See, I didn't have a ton of matches, but I'm telling you, these first 6 especially are the ones that have the most similarities to the most other Pat McGrath palettes. So obviously this is Divine Rose 2. This is Sunlit Seduction. Same colors, different fonts. Okay, let me pull out the last palette for you. And then the last one I wanted to compare was Utopian Dream, especially, you know, the first 6 minus the special shades. Take a look at my arm. These two, I might argue, are actually the closest, right? And especially like these first 4 shades are pretty much exactly the same. We do have a little bit more pops in the Utopian Dream palette. And if I'm being honest, if you are in between the Utopian Dream and the Sunlit Seduction, I'd go with the Utopian Dream because there's more pops, there's a little bit more variety in the colors, whereas there's just less variety in the Sunlit Seduction. Okay, so overall thoughts about this new Mothership palette. It's a beautiful palette, but it is most definitely not the palette that I would recommend the most to you guys. It's a very doable palette. It's a little bit disappointing at this point. And the biggest con for me about this is there's not a lot of variety in the looks you can create. I was searching through Instagram and online to look at the looks other people were creating, the looks that Pat McGrath were creating, and since this palette so heavily sits with one specific color story, especially with the glimmer shades, because there's not a lot of precision you can get with the glitter shades. You kind of just pop them on the eye and they take over the whole show. A lot of the looks more or less kind of look the same, and I think when you're paying so much money for one palette, that's not a great sign, especially since the beginning of the brand in the earlier palettes, if you look at them, a lot of them have so much variety in undertones, depths, and textures. So it really gave you a lot more versatility, daytime to nighttime looks that you can create. It's just getting more and more boring and monotone. Like, this is quite the monotone palette. Now, like I said, I keep saying it's a gorgeous palette. You can get gorgeous looks, but it's not the one that I'm going to recommend the most to you guys. If you like the vibes of this, I'd even recommend Utopian Dream over this one. You know, it's good, but it actually does have a flaw of having a dud shade right here, which is not what you want in a 10-pan, $128 palette. So point blank, do not pay full price for this palette. Do you hear me? If you're a collector, if you just like the MCGRATH formula, it still is a pretty palette, but you also have all of these colors, you have to love this color story to really want to get it. And I'm going to continue using it because one pattern that I do find with MCGRATH palettes is I might not be feeling them at first, but time really does tell, because a lot of times I'll find myself reaching for palettes more than the others. Like Divine Rose 1 and 2, I talked about how boring those were, and those have ended up becoming my most used palettes. So you'll see as time goes by whether or not this becomes a favorite or most used palette of mine. But initial first impressions, if you have a lot of MCGRATH palettes, you don't need it. It's not her best work, but the formulas are so nice and it still is gorgeous. So I hope you guys enjoyed this review and found it helpful. If you picked up this palette, let me know your thoughts. Are you feeling the same way that I did? If you are looking to get into more MCGRATH and hearing about my recommendations, I have a whole folder, a whole collection of everything MCGRATH. I've tried everything from the brand overall. While this might not have been my favorite launch, there are so many hits from the brand that I do recommend, and I'm just going to keep it real with you guys. So I hope you enjoyed this video, found it helpful, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Bye guys, have a good one.